Industry plant. It's a word that I started to hear frequently around the mid-2010s, mostly in regard to hip-hop and pop artists, but in recent years, the term has made its way into the world of electronic music. The bass music trio known as Levity has been making waves in the past couple of years, but a slew of industry plant accusations came alongside their recent success. So is Levity actually an industry plant? Let's get to the bottom of it. First off, we need to get an understanding of what an industry plant actually is, as there's a lot of debate around the requirements for being labeled as such. When I first heard the term, the original definition was basically when a label scoops up a relatively unknown artist and controls every aspect of the brand while giving them a financially backed artificial boost, all while the artist acts like their growth was organic. In simpler terms, it's basically a label trying to deceive fans into thinking that said artist blew up on their own merit. However, the definition has morphed over time to the point where anyone who had some sort of leg up is prone to being called an industry plant. According to Wikipedia, an industry plant is defined as follows: musicians who become popular through nepotism, inheritance, wealth, or their connections in the music industry rather than on their own merits. Now, I don't totally agree with that looser definition, though I do acknowledge that things like family wealth or industry connections can absolutely be an advantage, but that doesn't automatically make someone an industry plant, and we're going to talk about that. So let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. John Haldren, one of the three members of Levity, is the younger brother of Robby Haldren, who is half of Louis the Child. The vast majority of Levity's industry plant accusations are hinged on this one fact. But some of the other reasons that people think Levity are plants is because of the almost too good to be true story of how they landed a last-minute set at Electric Forest in 2023, which was a pivotal point in their exposure. On top of that, some people have been critical of their heavy use of TikTok to grow, but I'll be honest, that one doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But regardless, we'll break down each and every one of these accusations, and afterward, we'll dive a little bit into Levity's backstory to see what was going on before they blew up. Levity directly addressed these accusations on Reddit by making a few key points. They started off by saying that industry plants literally do not exist in bass music, and I agree with this completely. Here's the thing, there just isn't nearly as much money to be made by major labels in bass music compared to more popular genres like hip-hop and pop. Think about it this way, major record labels are basically no different than private equity investment firms. They have the funds and resources to make things happen, and they make very calculated decisions that weigh risk and potential return on investment. There really just aren't that many big electronic artists in the grand scheme of things, so the chances of a label successfully propping up an artist to the level of someone like, let's say, Accusation is extremely low, if not zero. It just isn't worth the investment for them, and that's why I agree with Levity's point here. The second thing they addressed is their 2023 Electric Forest pop-up set by saying, "Our Electric Forest set was 100% natural, no connections, no planning, just luck. It was all fielded by one local Chicago photographer who I ran into day of near my campsite and asked if he could shoot it. The artist we filled in for had a flight delay and ended up playing later that night. 10 to 50 people were there at the start of our set, thousands heard it and loved it and joined in. You literally can't fake that." So I don't have much of an opinion on this because I'm pretty clueless about how these side stage type sets at music festivals are coordinated, but I did my best to look into it to try to gain a better understanding. John said that he went to the festival as a fan, and he got word from Alicia Carlin, who's a talent buyer for Electric Forest, that one of the acts had a flight delay and would be missing their set at the Honeycomb stage. Alicia asked if Levity could fill in, and they agreed. However, the only problem is PJ and Josh weren't actually at the festival, only John was. So as soon as they got word of the opportunity, PJ left work in Chicago and drove straight to Michigan and made it an hour before the set. Now for Josh, he wouldn't have been able to make it in time, and he had schoolwork to get done, so he didn't perform with them during that set. I don't know exactly how they had a point of connection with Alicia Carlin, as Levity didn't sign with her current management and booking agency until a few months after that Electric Forest set, so that is a bit of a mystery. However, if this was actually a staged event, I would imagine that all three members would be at the festival ready to go, but that wasn't the case, so I am inclined to believe Levity's story here. The third thing that they addressed was their growth on TikTok, basically saying that they consistently posted videos using their songs, and these videos gained traction organically. Personally, I don't think there's any arguing with this, because TikTok is the newest artist growth vehicle to come around, and social media presence is more important now than ever for artists. I think that Levity understood this and they played the game accordingly, so I'm not really sure how TikTok growth would give any merit to industry plant accusations. Now, the last thing that they addressed is the fact that John is Robby from Louis the Child's brother. Here's what they said. Despite popular belief, we genuinely have never used any nepotism. Being related does not equal nepotism. Using your relation does. Nepotism leads to the most unfulfilled life, which has never interested me. So 7 years ago when I started, yes, we didn't come out of nowhere. We've worked endlessly for 7 years and have deleted most of our previous music because we don't connect with it anymore. My brother and I made a pact that he wouldn't help me, and I never wanted his help. He and I live 2,000 miles away and see each other 2 to 3 times a year, so we spend our time being brothers, not doing production classes, lol. I learned everything from YouTube. We rarely even talk, so he's not giving out advice or anything. Multiple heads have seen our journey from the start and have attested to the fact that we earned every bit of this. Also, industry people only care about one thing: money. Being related to someone does not equal money. Any connections he had didn't even know that my project existed because there was no money in it, so they never bothered caring. They all were the last people to even notice we had started coming up and only found out through natural ways they do to find any new artist. So I can definitely believe this because as someone who has been following Louis the Child since 2015, I didn't even know that Robby had a brother, let alone a brother who made music, until I heard about Levity about a year or two ago. I didn't even learn about the connection to Louis the Child until maybe like 6 months after I found out about Levity. So in my opinion, pretty much everything they said in that Reddit comment checks out. But I did look into it a little further just to see if there was anything going on behind the scenes. Louis the Child and Levity don't have the same manager, so this backs up what they're saying. However, they do share a booking agent, Jay Moss from Wasserman, but Jay Moss has an enormous roster of high-profile artists, so in my opinion, both Louis the Child and Levity being represented by Jay Moss doesn't automatically raise any red flags for me. However, I did find one thing that seems to at least kinda sorta contradict what Levity was saying in regards to nepotism in their Reddit post, but we're gonna get to that in a little bit. So now that we have all of that out of the way, let's take a look into the backstory of Levity. Levity currently consists of 3 members: John Haldren from Chicago, PJ Carberry from Los Angeles, and Josh Taram from Minnesota. However, Levity originally started out as a duo with only John and PJ. The two of them met during their freshman year at the University of Iowa in 2017. They connected over a shared love for electronic music, and then they began producing together. A couple years later in 2019, they started playing at local venues in Iowa City and releasing their own music. Though all of their old music has been deleted, and I'm not sure if there's any way to actually track it down. So they did the local college DJ thing for a few years, and it appears that John actually dropped out of college later on, but I'm unsure about PJ. Eventually, both of them moved to Chicago, where they would play opening slots at club shows. In September of 2022, they announced on Instagram that they added a third member, Josh, who was going to college in Nebraska at the time. Now, the bottom of this post is the thing that I was talking about earlier that made me kind of raise my eyebrows, and it reads as follows. The first show the 3 of us will be performing at together will be Friendsgiving on November 25th with Louis the Child and Lupe Fiasco. Now, that does seem to kind of go against what they were saying in the Reddit comment, but at the same time, it's not a sign that they had their career handed to them on a silver platter either. I decided to look further into the connection and found that Louis the Child and Levity went back-to-back at Electric Forest in 2024. Aside from those 2 instances, I couldn't really find anything else. So regarding opening for Louis the Child in 2022, there are some things that we need to take into consideration. So for one, Levity had already been going at it for 5 years by that point, and they already had plenty of experience playing opening slots in Chicago. So was Levity given that opening slot because of the family relation to Louis the Child? Yeah, maybe so, I don't know. But like I said, there were regular openers around Chicago, so even if the opportunity came because of that connection, it's not like it was undeserved. And let's be honest, it's not like that was some career-defining moment either, but I'm sure it helped them at least marginally with exposure, but probably nothing crazy. In regards to Levity going back-to-back with Louis the Child at Electric Forest 2024, Levity was already big by that point, so the way I see it is more like brothers having a fun opportunity together, not one brother helping the other. So now that we know a little bit more about the backstory of Levity, let's talk some more about their 2023 Electric Forest set, because a fair amount of people seem to think that the whole thing was staged. Personally, I don't think that it was staged for reasons mentioned earlier in the video, but for the sake of argument, let's say that it was staged. People clearly enjoyed the set. I mean, if you watch videos of it, everyone was having a blast, and I don't think that you can fake that. And the momentum they got from that set didn't go to waste either. Just a few months later, they released one of the biggest tracks of the year with Flip It, and they've had even more successful tracks after that, like Front to Back and Postman. So it's pretty clear that people respond well to their music and performances, regardless of how anyone thinks they got to where they are now. They have almost 1 million listeners on Spotify, and they recently sold out 2 nights at Mission Ballroom the day that the tickets went for sale, and the show is still 6 months away. It's been almost 2 years since that first Electric Forest set, and they've only continued to grow in that time, so it seems that the Levity hype is here to stay. In my opinion, being called an industry plant is really a badge of honor because it typically only happens when an artist gets big and gets some haters along with all their new fans. It's nothing new, and Levity is a part of a long list of electronic artists who have been accused of the same thing over the years, including artists like John Summit and Sarah Landry as some more recent examples. Haters have been around forever, and they're really only helping out the artists that they claim to despise so much by giving them more publicity and helping social media algorithms push their content even harder. The psychology of a hater is a pretty interesting thing because, in my mind, if you don't like something, you just move on and find something that you actually do like, rather than expressing how much you dislike said thing. But regardless, the haters are here to stay, and so is Levity.